Hello and welcome to our Just Talk, Talk Just panel discussion, Womanist Theopoetics, Embodied Intersectional Approaches. Tonight's webinar is sponsored by Union Presbyterian Seminary's Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation and the Katie Geneva Cannon Center for Womanist Leadership. Our panelists tonight are Dr. Oluwatomisin Oleyaka Oradane, Assistant Professor in Black Religious Traditions, Constructive Theology, and Ethics at Bright Divinity School. We would also like to welcome Dr. Lakeisha Lockhart, Assistant Professor of Christian Education at Union Presbyterian Seminary. And our moderator tonight is Reverend Dr. Melanie Jones Quarles, Director at the Katie Geneva Cannon Center for Womanist Leadership and Assistant Professor of Ethics, Theology, and Culture at Union Presbyterian Seminary. Melanie, the floor is yours.
Welcome everyone to this Just Talk, Just series sponsored by the Katie Geneva Cannon Center for Womanist Leadership and the Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation. I am Dr. Melanie Jones Quarles, and I serve as Assistant Professor of Ethics, Theology, and Culture and the Director of the Katie Geneva Cannon Center for Womanist Leadership. Tonight, our subject is Womanist Theopoetics, and I think it is fitting for us to begin today's conversation with the poem. This poem is entitled Essence 25, first delivered by Oprah Winfrey, but it is written by Kefra Burns. Girl, look at me. Not even 1 month old and already calling for a revolution. Truth be told, I was a revolution. I'm 25 now, a woman of my time, a product of my own generation. I know who I am. I was conceived in the struggle when Black power and the women's liberation movement made it in a hotbed of social unrest. When I was born in the dawn of the new decade, I cried, Black is beautiful. Sisterhood is powerful. I had emerged full grown, the real Aphrodite, and had a 9-inch afro to prove it. Fact is, I was fine. And for the first time, I knew it. Knew that I was stunning in all of my licorice black, cocoa brown, caramel, and cafe au lait skin tones. I turned 400 years of pain into pride. As for the first time, I was loving the soft contours of my African nose, my full, luscious lip, and the ample round behind that Black men call my onion because it brings tears to their eyes. Oh, I know you loved me. How could you help yourself? When I was too beautiful to be ignored, too determined to be denied, much too outspoken to be seen and not heard, and otherwise just too marvelous for words. Back then, they called me Fannie Lou Hamer, Angela Davis, and Shirley Chisholm. That was me who marched into Mississippi Democratic Convention and said I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I had a history of tired in my bones, not the kind of tired that makes you want to sit down, but the kind that makes you want to get up. I was the voice of the Black Revolution. I was the first Black candidate for president. They called me then nervous, a troublemaker, subversive. But since I was elected into the Senate in 1992, they called me Senator Carol Mosley Braun. Oh, I've been called a lot of things lately. Congresswoman, Surgeon General, Mayor of DC. At 25, I'm a Renaissance woman, already a legend in my prime. Forgive me if I boast a bit, but I'm an Emmy-winning, Oscar-copping, Grammy-grabbing, Pulitzer Prize poet and Nobel laureate. Beloved, yes, I'm bookish. I'm on everybody's bestseller list. Seems like all my best conjure comes up in words that cast spells like the Song of Solomon, words like jazz that possess the secret of joy. I know you know me. I'm that sass mouth colored girl on Broadway who couldn't just sing a nice somewhere over the rainbow song. My byline alone would fill a volume or two. I'm Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, Ntozake Shange, and Rita Dove. I'm Terry McMillan, Alice Walker, and Gwendolyn Brooks. Look me up sometime. I'm in the book. I've gone from Motown to Tinseltown, but I've never forgotten where I've came from. I went from lead singer supreme to Hollywood's first leading lady in a big screen Black love story with Billy D. I've given my own talent a 2 thumbs up because 25 years right here says Sister Acts in Raisin in the Sun and Sound of Malcolm X and The Color Purple. You saw my name when the credits rolled. I'm Diane Carroll and Diana Ross, Cicely Tyson, Whoopi Goldberg, Halle Berry, and Angela Bassett. I'm a Hollywood mogul and an entertainment empire. I'm Suzanne DePass. I'm Oprah Winfrey. And I've had to orchestrate my own fanfare for 25 years. So forgive me if I toot my horn for another chorus or two, but from R&B to pop, from rap to rock, everything I touch turns to gold. I battled my way into the opera houses. I sing jazz. I am jazz. And my song is simply unforgettable. You know me. But just for the record, I'm Sarah Vaughan, Nancy Wilson, and Natalie Cole. I'm Aretha Franklin, Whitney Houston, and Janet Jackson. I'm Kathleen Battle, Jesse Norman, and Leontine Price. And oh, by the way, I run the company now, too. Say you didn't catch my name, I'm Sylvia Rome. Olympic in my stride and epic in my progress. I have triumphed in every field of endeavor. I'm the fastest woman in the world, the president of a Fortune 500 company, and a space shuttle astronaut. I'm Jackie Joyner Kersey, Ann Fudge, and Dr. Mae Jemison. Like an Afro-American Express card, I'm everywhere you want to be. I stole the runways of Paris and redefined fine as a voluptuous, full-figured woman. I'm a fashion statement. Here's my book and my look. Because 25 years ago, my do was all pics and froze and Afro puffs, but today, you may see me straightened, braided, bald, weaved, wigged, twisted, dyed, or locked in a dreadful headful, all woolly-woven down around my strong brown shoulders. Just so there's no mistake in my identity, I am free, Black, and 25, independent of mind and centered in spirit. I know who I am. I'm only telling you so you can know exactly who you're dealing with. Mine is an open book, a public diary. I didn't write it to read you. I love you. Say, brother and sister, look here. You even got your own page to tell me what's in your heart while I tell you what's in mine. Over the last 25 years, I have soared and stumbled, but always forward. I'm only 25, but I've been around for you, my sister, and for you, my brother, all along. Oh, you know me. I'm Essence. Essence 25 by Kefra Burns. This is an exciting conversation tonight, and I thought that we do it in an embodied way. Theopoetics, in many ways, represents an emerging field within religious studies that integrates art, song, poetry, speech, and other embodied practices to emphasize faith, imagination, and wonder. As a prophetic social movement that addresses the survival and liberation of Black women, Womanism reclaims Black women's experiences, history, bodies, aesthetic, literature, and art as primary sources for theological reflection and biblical interpretation. Tonight's conversation is entitled Womanist Theopoetics, Embodied Intersectional Approaches. And it emphasizes the powerful influence of womanist approaches to theopoetics that values our embodied ways of being and knowing, while also mapping intersectional realities of oppression and transformative possibilities for hope. I'm excited to be here with two of the most fantastic colleagues, Dr. Oluwatomisin Olayinka Oredane, who is an assistant professor in Black religious traditions and constructive theology and ethics, and the director of the Black Church Studies at Bright Divinity School in Fort Worth, Texas. Her scholastic and creative work engages theopoetics from a Black diasporic perspective, constructive theology, liminal identity and faith, African American articulations of womanist theology and ethics, and post-colonial thought. She is the author of The Theology of Mercy Amba Odioke, Ecumenism, Feminism, and Communal Practice, a Notre Dame Press monograph that links how the events and pursuits of Odioye's life inform her ecumenical path and the formation of African women's theology. Dr. Oredane is also the co-editor of the anthology Through Edmonds Theopoetics in Color, Embodied Approaches to Theological Discourse, which is the first theopoetic work featuring all racial and ethnic minoritized scholars. And she is also the author of the book in process, The Care Book, A Theological Ethic of Care, which examines an ethic of care from a minoritized theoethical perspective. Welcome, Dr. Oredane.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Our second panelist is certainly no stranger to Union Presbyterian Seminary and the Katie Geneva Cannon Center for Womanist Leadership. Dr. Lakeisha Lockhart, this Southern lady hails from Columbus, Georgia, by way of Waynesville, Missouri. She's a daughter, a sister, the coolest auntie around, a wife, a mother, and a playful womanist scholar activist who believes in the power of play, movement, aesthetics, and creative arts in life and theology. She is not only an educator, but a facilitator, a rope jumper, a game player, a co-creator, a sojourner, an advocate, and catalyst for critical consciousness and engagement in educating in faith and living into that faith through various spiritual and artistic practices. She actively advocates for the usage of the body as a locus for doing theology through engaged and embodied pedagogical practices. She has co-authored, and authored numerous publications and book chapters, and she is the co-editor of Theopoetics in Color alongside Dr. Oredane. Her awards and honors include Millennial Womanist to Watch, Images of Success from Claflin University, and a First Woman Innovative Grant from the Religious Education Association Project. In her spare time, she loves dancing, playing games, engaging in spiritual and artistic practices, and watching movies. Welcome, Dr. Lockhart.
Hello. Happy to be here. Thank you. I see y'all in the chat. Hey.
It is so exciting to be here. Probably many of you saw, but as soon as the information went out, it was kind of viral because folks are excited about this conversation, and folks are so excited about the work that y'all are doing together. So let's just jump right in. What is theopoetics? What is theopoetics?
Oh, let's see. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start, Tommy?
Well, yes and no. I want to give a quick, because it wouldn't be right of us to not acknowledge the hard work and the embodiment of excellence that is Dr. Jones-Quarles, and
yes,
you've done to lead the Center for Womanist Leadership. So first of all, we need to just honor everything that you've been doing, honor that you've created the opportunity for us to talk about these things. So thank you. Blessings to you. Keep doing what you're doing. We are rooting for you, and
always
we are support you for sure. So no, I did not want to answer. Dr. Lockhart.
So I'll answer, but then I'm gonna throw you one. So when I think of theopoetics, I feel like it's an opening, right? It's this space of opening of imagination, of creative God reflection, God talk, God space from a place that involves our body. And for me, it's always moving towards freedom, liberation. It's this space that, again, as you mentioned, it involves like the poetics, it involves music, dance, movement. It just creates and makes space for all of who we are, the how we get there, the what we do, how we communicate with God. All of that is taken into account. And I will say that, and the reason why I said I was going to throw it back to Tomi is because she talks beautifully about how there's two creation narratives of theopoetics. There's one that is very much a traditional sense where it is often not people of color that have done that work, which is, we think of Stanley Hopper, David Miller, Amos Wilder, and Tomi, please feel free to throw in names that I'm not thinking about right now. I know there was also a recent publication by Roland and Jeremy, starts with the F. Fackenthal. There we go. And I know they came out with a recent one and really thinking about it as kind of, I think the expression they use is like expressions of life in process, but really just a move towards towards thinking about that. And that's kind of, I think, what you define in the work as kind of a traditional sense of theopoetics, and kind of what we get to, at least in the book that we're doing, is really around this space of what it means to have theopoetics in color, and recognizing kind of the inherent epistemology and ontology of who we are and how we express ourselves as people of color in the world, how that is a theopoetic of itself, how we show up, how we are in relationship with God, the imagination, the creativity, the movement, the breath, the dance of it all. So that would be my very long-winded definition of something that's almost indefinable. Tell me, what do you
that wasn't long enough. I think that was a beautiful summary, beautiful explanation. What is my long and short of it? In the introduction, as Lakeisha said, I do say there's two creation stories. There's one with traditional theopoetics that is kind of born from a place of anxiety around kind of losing relevance around God talk in the theological academy. And then I named theopoetics in color as something that's kind of all inherently been in how minoritized persons have been trying to think about and talk about God. The short way I would think about it is like an embodied conversation with the divine, whether that embodiment comes out in dance, whether it comes out in poetry, whatever language, quote unquote, it comes out in, it's something that's inherent and that kind of flows out of us naturally to kind of draw closer to, be in conversation with, and explore what relationship with the divine means. So for me, it's like, if you want to boil it down to it, I'd say minoritized persons, we do God talk from the space of our bodies. So it's embodied conversation with the divine, and however that our talking, quote unquote, happens, that can be called theopoetics, or at least theopoetics in color.
Yeah, I think we're already getting there in terms of embodiment. When you say embodiment, what are you pointing to for folks who are just joining us, who are thinking about what does embodiment mean? How does embodiment inform theopoetics? Can we get to that a little bit more deeper?
Yeah, I'll just start initially so for me, embodiment is very much just the way we move through the world, our existence, our embodiment, how we show up, how we choose to show up, and just realizing that in how we show up in our bodies, we know the divine in various ways differently. We know the divine in various ways because of our bodies, because of how our bodies exist in the world, whether it's, various abilities, whether it's, our gender identity, whether it's, race, ethnicity, our conversations, how we find God, what we're doing with God, the theopoeticness of it, it's different based on our bodies. And so how we show up and all that we bring to it, our embodiment is part of that conversation. How can it not be? Because it often comes right out of who we are, our bodily experiences, and how we move our bodies through the world, and how the world often doesn't want to see our bodies moved in certain ways. So it's that combination of how we move, but also how the world has put on us how we should and should not move, given what our bodies are and are not.
I mean, beautifully said. To add to that, it's a matter of like, okay, what is this? What is this thing that what is this What is this being that I live in? And how does this being, one, experience the world, but experience where the divine interacts with, intersects with, coexists with, changes, alters, moves the world as well. So it's literal attention to the body, but also attentive to the stories, the narratives, the histories that such bodies have incurred, such bodies experience. And it's trying to figure out, how do we do divine naming? How do we figure out what is of the divine and what is against the divine through the literal avenue of the respective physical body and all of its identities and details, but also how the world treats such bodies as well because of its identities and details. So embodiment is it's our theological context in many ways.
Also our first one, right? Like that's our first text, context, all of us.
It's text and context. And there's no other way to begin thinking about the divine. You can't think of the divine outside of yourself. The self is the thing, that the lens through which you try to explore and explain the creator, the divine, how divinity is moving, how it's showing up. So embodiment, especially within theopoetics, is saying we're not going to try to push it to the side. We're not going to pretend to do this thing called objective theological discourse. We're going to say everything is deeply particular, deeply subjective, deeply impacted by how we exist in the world. And the divine is big enough for us to learn more and more about them through it's really interesting. You learn about the vastness of the divine through the particularity of the body.
Yeah, I think that's so, I mean, there's so many gems there, particularly in relation to traditional, and I don't even want to say traditional, but Western God talk has often problematized the body, right? And this kind of theopoetics in color, embodied approach is just, in many ways, I love that title because it raises up or reclaims the body in a way that says, no, this is the primary way by which we come to know God, that we come to know the divine, and becomes a kind of source as well as a resource for that knowing. Listen, the book already looks amazing. First off, that cover, I think, just everything, right? And I don't think I can even wait. When does it drop? August? Like, I'm like on the needles, waiting to get my copy. If y'all haven't got it, please pre-order it because it's absolutely something that will be essential. It will be not only groundbreaking, but essential resource for classrooms, but also for personal formation and development. Tell us about the book. How did it come into being? How did this start? Give it to us.
So this Tommy started all of this good, foolish, wonderfulness. It's not a word. I'm making it one today. Tommy started all of this goodness. So do you want to start? Because I also want to make sure we shout out all the people in the book, because I know a lot of people are also on the call. But we can do the origin story, and then we can shout out the people in the book. But essentially, I mean, and Tommy, you can talk about where it started, because I think it actually started in a class for you, because I think you were teaching a class, and you can tell more about it, but like there wasn't a book that was doing what you wanted it to do. And so she like sent a call out to like the community. Hey folks, who wants to like write this book that I need to put in my class? That's literally what she said. And so then literally like so many of us were like, I'm in. So then let's see, it was Brian Bantam, Patrick Reyes, Liz Valle Ruiz, Tiffany Trent, Tamisha Tyler, Carolina Hinojosa Cisneros, Johanna Agra Juncker, James Howard Hill Jr., Peace Lee, Joyce Del Rosario, and Yara Gonzalez Justiciano, that were like, let's do this. And that we all have something to offer and to say. And literally then it was like, Tomi's brain went to work and kind of put things in sections. And then I was like, hey, Tomi, I would love to be a part and lend some of my like logistical helpfulness and thinking about that. And then we started some process. But do you want to say any more about the kind of the genesis of it before I get into like process?
Nope, you got it. Go ahead.
No, but they need to know where it came from for you. That's important. Like you needed, like it wasn't. But no, it wasn't there in the class. Like that's the part. Like that's the important piece is that you didn't have what you needed. Like that's the important part.
Yeah, you're doing such a great job. I mean, I'm just like, yeah, well, then what? No, absolutely. And I think it's in the introduction as well. I was teaching a class on theopoetics. Fun fact, don't name a class theopoetics if people don't know what theopoetics is, because they're going to make you rename it. So I named it Embodied Theology. And I was like, all right, let me get these books together. What books? I couldn't really find anything. I mean, I had some Rubem Alves, who is a forefather in many ways in theopoetics, kind of done more in this style, a Brazilian theologian. But outside of Alves, I wasn't getting much. I mean, I was trying to draw from different theoretical sources, but I didn't have any religious studies, theology, ethics type of sources. So I said, we need to create one. So Lakeisha's right, on Facebook, like, who wants to do this? And people responded and they were serious about it. So we followed up, putting things together, amidst the pandemic. So things felt really long, but we deeply appreciate how committed everybody was to making sure they put out brilliant, beautiful chapters that are quality and that are so unique and different that different people are going to be able to get different things from each chapter. It's like, I'm not calling this the Thriller album, but it's like, there's not a bad track, there's like, you're not going to miss one. So like all of it's solid, and we are so proud, and I'm just surprised and in love with how brilliant our colleagues are, and that they were willing to put so much time and effort into making this creation what it is. But that's the genesis, that's the origin.
And not only that, but I think it's also just our colleagues' boldness in daring to write something that like was inside of them, but doesn't always have a space in various academic places because it doesn't sound the way it should sound. It doesn't look the way it should look. I mean, literally, Dr. Reyes is talking about cyborgs in a future world. I mean, it's dope. I mean, there's also a chapter about potlucks. I mean, I just get, as you can tell, I get very excited when I even just think about this. And I just think about, again, the process, literally writing this through a pandemic. And part of the process for us, and I think why we were able to produce something that is so, I think game changing, is because I think it was how we did it. We wanted to make sure we weren't just talking about it embodied theopoetic, but we were actually doing it in practice. So for us, it was important that all of our authors, every contributor was being heard and seen. We would have Zoom calls just to check in, not necessarily about the book, but just to see how people were doing. Like, hey, how's it going? Are you okay? What do you need? Let's vent a little bit. Let's talk about what's going on. We did like beloved community groups where we like read each other's works, like where we gave each other feedback because we're made better together. And like for them to devote this kind of time and energy to each other, to this process. And then even points where, hey, I mean, there might've been a deadline and we kind of were like, hey, our collaborators need more time. Like it is a pandemic. Like they need more time to like flesh out what they're feeling. And we fought for that. Like we were like, hey, can we, right? Like, nobody wants to go talk to publishers about that, but it mattered to us about the how. Again, theopoetics, the how you produce something. Every single part and piece of it matters, even to the background. The cover art, you can see my background is the cover art by one of the actual authors, Johanna Agra Juncker, literally created this piece for this book. I mean, the dopeness level. I just can't say enough about the colleagues and the writing. I mean, I will say, I think it does rival Thriller because there's not a bad track. There really isn't. I'm excited. There you go.
I think what I love most when I saw the book cover and saw it, I was like, these are the two people who I think, two colleagues that I've known, both of you over time, who just model what you practice, right? You embody what you, both in the classroom, to your personhood, to your writing, to your scholarship. So it's super, I could see that flows over into all the contributors because of that kind of embodied ethic that you already exhibit. I also think the best textbooks or the best books come from ways or paths that we recognize this doesn't exist. So we need to create space for it to exist and to kind of call it into being. That's that June Jordan kind of poem. I want to build something at a tree that ain't never been planted, right? It's calling something into being that doesn't exist. I know both of you are artists in your own right, but who are your muses? Who are you looking to for your inspiration, or how did you come to theopoetics, to your own practice?
Oh man.
You go first, Dr. Tommy. Go ahead.
I'll go first. Those are like two very separate questions. Who are my muses? I am Yoruba, and we are the progenitors of create something if it's not there. So we are creators. We are creation people. We make things. We try things. We try things on. We experiment with things. So in terms of muses, I mean, my people first and foremost. But then I love. So I'm in the academy. But what I love seeing are people who you can tell like this is their thing, but they also have many other things as well. So Audre Lorde, even if I'm thinking in the womanist tradition, I love that Dr. Cannon did a little bit of art, did some I think Dolores Williams did poetry. Like there are these people who are writing these groundbreaking, amazing things, contributing things to theological and just social thought, but they're also multiply creative. So people who are able to embrace those sides of themselves and feed those sides of themselves, those to me are my muses. And how I came to theopoetics, real talk, I just do what I do. And I ran into Khaled Keith Perry, and he's like, oh, this kind of sounds like theopoetics. And I was like, that's a fun name. Let me go to this conference. And I got there and I was like, these are my people. We do religious studies. We do religious thought, theology, in the expressive and creative ways that make sense to us. So in some ways, theopoetics found me. And I've been living there ever since. So that's my answer to that. Dr. Lockhart, muses.
So I guess kind of the bigger muses, well, not bigger, but I'll just say kind of ones that more people probably know about are Ntozake Shange. I literally remember to this day being in my undergraduate classroom at Claflin University, shout out to my HBCU, and Amenti Sujai, Dr. Amenti Sujai, was teaching. I don't even remember the title. I think it was like a womanist, feminist something, but I had never heard either of those words before. And I just remember like reading Alice Walker, Patricia Hill Collins, and it was in Ntozake Shange, and finally feeling seen for the first time. I mean, I've always kind of made sense of my relationship with the divine and of God with dance and movement and body. And I genuinely thought something was just wrong with me. I thought, you know what? I'm just not going to tell people about this because clearly this is just a personal thing. No one else gets this. I'm just, it's just going to be me and my God thing. And that's okay. But being able to like read these texts and then, getting into Toni Morrison, and I mean, just the clearing space, the movement of it, the beauty of it, the dance of it all, just to see it and to see it celebrated, to see it in literature, For Color Girls changed my life. The Bluest Eye changed my, it was in the reading of it, the words that I didn't have words for, the feelings, the emotions, all of that I didn't have words for. I finally felt seen and heard. Like, these are my people. So those would definitely be my muses. And I find myself nowadays, my muses, I have two little humans that I've been blessed with, and actually two little boys, two little brown boys, that are my now muses, because I know I'm accountable to them. I want them to know all of this. I want them to know what it is that mama does. I want them to know why mama's up here dancing, and just, I want them to know all the things, and I want them to always see themselves reflected in my story and in the story of the divine. And so for me, they're also my muses and how I show up. And so for Theopoetics, again, it was something I was already doing, but again, undergrad, when I took this class with Dr. Sujai, that was when it shifted and I started finding language. I didn't find Theopoetics language, probably similar to Tomi. I think it was like a Patrick Reyes to Khaled Keith Perry combination that then went into ARC, and then meeting people like Tomi and Tamisha and Tiffany and so many other folks that were a part of this conversation, right? That were there and doing a lot of this work, and then starting the conferences and doing so much of this, that I was like, oh, Theopoetics, yeah, I do it. I mean, I do a lot around play and aesthetics and imagination, and that I just didn't know it was called Theopoetics. And so I'm like, yeah, I can rip off of that. I can absolutely see how that's a part of that. These are my people, right? Like, absolutely. And we get it. We don't have to do the extra explanation of why this matters. Like, that's already a non-starter. We know from the beginning that it matters. So now we can continue the conversation. So yeah, so I guess that's that combo story for me too. Oh, and I see someone else shouted out Claflin University. Sorry.
Yes. I two things that I just want to just amplify. I mean, the fact that I think we need that creative energy, even as scholars and thinkers and clergy persons and all of that. And Katie Cannon is certainly, she talks about how she came into doodling as a result of a kind of talk with her therapist, who says you need some other ways to get your mind going in other patterns. And she stumbled upon that practice that has informed her, that Dr. Larkhart keeps up in many ways in faculty meetings and other ways that I love. I
really do.
And to you, Lakeisha, in terms of Dr. Cannon also talked about that when she was looking for theological perspectives from Black women, there were no texts that she could go to in the 1970s. And so her primary text became literature, became both fiction and nonfiction, or biographical works by Black women, African diaspora women, that helped her to come into God talk. You can't tell me that folks like Ntozake Shange and Alice Walker aren't doing a rigorous God talk, like rigorous. Octavia Butler. Oh my goodness. Rigorous. God. If you don't know Octavia Butler, please
go research. Google.
Right? Zora Neale Hurston, right? They're doing a rigorous God talk as a way of developing literature, which seems to me that womanism in particular is a perfect marriage with theopoetics. I mean, just looking at that third definition of Walker, first off, the definition of womanism is already poetry, right? Loves music, loves dance, loves food and roundness, loves herself, loves the spirit, loves herself regardless, right? If that ain't poetry, like, look at the beauty of words and the floweriness of the language, but also the way in which the words themselves transport you into different spheres, like into different experiences. Loves food and roundness. I mean, it just transports you into all of these things that are a part of the richness, the rich tapestry of Black cultures. And African diasporic identities. So I'm wondering, what is womanist theopoetics? It almost sounds like that's a double word, because in many ways, womanism to me is already very poetic. And theopoetics, in some ways, depending on whose perspective, seems to be very womanish, right? So how are y'all defining womanist theopoetics?
Dr. Tomi.
This is a fun question. I consider this is fun because in many ways, womanist theopoetics is like a new type of term that is literally in this moment kind of being imagined, being created. What is womanist theopoetics? I mean, I would say I'll start with this. I call what I do Black theopoetics. And Black theopoetics for me is a child of womanist theology and ethics, Black liberationist theology, Black mysticism, Black feminism. It has a number of different birthplaces, if you will. But in terms of what womanist theopoetics is, if we want to break down to its most simplest form, it's theopoetics through a womanist lens. A womanist lens is going to be for the liberation of Black women, but also the entire Black community. And in that, we know that Black feminism and womanism kind of note that when this group is liberated, then everyone else in many ways reaps the benefit of that. So it's theopoetics liberated. That is what womanist theopoetics is. It's God talk completely liberated, God talk completely unrestrained. That's how I would, again, in this moment where we are currently imagining this thing called womanist theopoetics together. God talk unrestrained, God talk completely liberated, God talk towards the complete liberation of God's creation. That would be my take.
I'm looking back in the chat because someone said something that I want to, I think it was you, Dr. Handy. I think you said something about dancing and like a dancing talk with the divine. I'm trying to find it. It's a dance conversation. It's a dance conversation with the divine self. And for me, I feel like that might be a really good idea of thinking about like the combination of womanist and theopoetics together, right? It's this beautiful dance that we're doing. It's the, the double Dutch. It's the, it's all of these things that are very just womanish. It's the redemptive self-love. It's the radical subjectivity. It's the traditional communalism. It's the engaging at intersections of justice and liberation and doing it towards liberation and doing it with flair and unapologetically as yourself, daring to show up as yourself in these spaces, like daring to not just talk about it, but write about it, be about it, and the very just you-ness of it all that only wominists can do in the way that we do. And so I feel like it's that combination of what that looks like. And I'm just thinking about it because I will say one of the chapters is a chapter that in the book is the one that I write about kind of womanist, like toward a wholeness in the academy, kind of like a womanist lens. And I just talk about what would it look like to have a theopoetic of wholeness where we can actually be in the academy and not be fragmented and fractured and bringing pieces of ourselves, but actually be whole. So I dream and I imagine what an academy can look like if we are whole as a womanist practice would be. So for me, that's very much a womanist theopoetic of wholeness, of liberation, of dancing together and double dutching and doing the beautiful work together unapologetically. So that would probably be my, again, as we're defining it in the moment.
I'm going to jump in because we are defining it in the moment, and I'm going to kind of we're gonna collectively, and Dr. Qualls, I also want to hear your thoughts too because we're making it in the moment. I love that womanism is so attentive to how Black women feel. I love it. I love that the affective is prominent. The affective is divine guide and resource towards reading a situation, reading where the holy and the sacred. I love that how Black women's feelings are central. So theopoetics, how you feel, is another way that I would think about a way to define what a womanist theopoetic is. Theology, how you feel, and trusting that feeling is true, that feeling is honest, that feeling is valuable, because the feelings of Black women in many ways have had to interrogate many different realities and circumstances and spaces. So they are a wellspring of truth in themselves. So in some ways, I'm gonna throw this in the definitional pot. Womanist Theopoetics is theology, how Black women feel.
And again, while we're adding, I want to add in a quote from you from the book. This is one that has resonated with me from when I heard it, and one that will continue to stay with me. But you talk about how doing this work is about having moving through the work and the wounds of our very existence. And if that's not a womanist, right, the work and the wounds, right, like realizing that the struggle and all of these pieces are part of who we are, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a part of it, like our very existence and how we show up because of the work, the wounds, the play, all of that. It's just, yeah, there you go. There's our working definitions. Someone go ahead and feel free to put that together and write that up.
But Dr. Quarles, I'm so curious. What do you think?
What you think?
It's so much happening in my mind right now because I'm just so, I think it's spot on. I think y'all are spot on in terms of that. I think the dynamism of womanism that allows a kind of multiplicity of creative expressions as a starting point or as a pathway, right, to one finding wholeness or wellness, to one finding the divine, is exactly how we get there. And embracing art, literature, liturgy, the aspects of the body, play, all of these are the pathways that Black women have been using and retooling. And theopoetics makes it a space by which that is not secondary or an addendum or an aside. Or something you do after you do this first. You know, you write the paper first and then you show me in this way. No, it's like this is the primary orientation and lens by which we began to, right, value, which is liberationist, right? Because liberationists would say life first, theology second, right? That it is the experiences of life that become possible spaces by which we began to value our theological convictions and ask these questions. This is good. I see some questions already in the chat. I think Dante Hillard asked, what's the relationship between theopoetics and performance studies?
Where's Tiffany Trent on the call? Where's Tiffany Trent on the call? She would probably be better equipped to answer this question than we are. She actually has, I think, degrees in like theater, has a performance. So connect with her, Dante. Again, if we're not giving you an adequate response, Tiffany, feel free to put some wisdom in the chat for our good folk. But tell me, do you want to take a first shot or?
Yeah, I don't know much about performance studies. I'm always kind of weary about the word study. I think it can denote a certain thing. If we can like kind of bracket studies and just put performance, just kind of, can we broaden it up a little bit? Then I would say their relationship is quite intimate. I think performance of any sort, whether it's theater, whether it's singing, whether it's acting, whether it's art performance, spoken word, I think these are all avenues and means by which divine revelation can come. So in terms of theopoetics in relationship with performance and maybe performance studies, it's a throughway through which divine, a clarity around the divine, revelation, surprise, insight about the divine can come through. But again, it's deeply embodied. That's the key. One is in tune with their body. One is expressing their body in the ways that feel most home to them. And once one settles in their home like that, then divine revelation is more prominent, is more present. I think can be felt and experienced. That would be how I would think the relationship with theopoetics and performance/performance studies to be.
And, you know, if you want to know a little bit more, feel free to, there's a chapter in the book that Tiffany writes, that Dr. Tiffany Trent writes, where she put a little bit in the chat about it, but talks about, again, value-based art, but like with research practices, collecting data, like all, how you do all of that from a theopoetic kind of perspective when you think about those performance pieces. So feel free to check out that chapter. She goes in and she does beautiful. So I don't even want to, I think that's good.
Here's an exciting question from the wonder, the wisdom, or the woman, the wonder, the wisdom. She asks, given the past and how far we've come, while also considering the present, what do you envision for the future of theopoetics and womanism?
Oh, the first word that comes up when I hear that is just to live, breathe, and be expansively. I feel like this is just kind of a crack, right? In not just a field, but in an academy that doesn't always value the embodied sense, that doesn't always embody the embodied, you know, epistemologies and ontology. It doesn't value those things. You know, I mean, again, I do a lot of work in play and theological aesthetics, and the amount of like, really play? How, like, so just for me, the hope for the future is just to expansively see the value in the body, in embodiment, in how we come to know, in various ways of coming to know and being in the world, and how we're actually made better for it. How it doesn't take anything away from rigor or challenge, but it actually adds to, because oftentimes doing the internal body work is probably more difficult than memorizing a text. I mean, just going to put that out there. But what it actually means to do the work, but also keeping your body as a part of it. I mean, and realizing there are more ways to do it. I mean, it's one thing to give a lecture, but to have creative assignments, to allow students to be able to express themselves creatively in whatever they produce, like that just brings things to a whole nother level. And again, you allow people to bring their whole self to a space, which for me, I think is the both theopoetics and womanism are about liberation. And I feel like if we're going to create more freeing spaces, more liberative spaces, it's about letting people show up in their fullness. So my hope would be that we do more of that, that we continue to live and be more expansively, and we just kind of crack these things just open even more than they already are, in beautiful ways. So that would probably be my hope, I guess, or my envisioning.
I think one of the places that can be improved around theopoetics is that it's born in and it's kind of primarily housed in the academy. Yeah. I think womanism is doing a good job, and you know, it's tough. Kind of churches are tough spaces to crack. Churches are tough places to begin change and transformation. But I've seen womanism coming into church spaces, coming into homiletics, sermons, kind of changing the minds and the cultures of churches. I think if womanism and theopoetics joined forces outside of the academy, moved into churches, people might be able to see, oh, I can play when I'm discovering God. I can create as a means of discovering God. It just helps it can help bring God talk even just closer to us on the ground and closer to our bodies. It can help God feel close and God discovery feel really close. So I think those womanism and theopoetics joined together can be a huge movement of just expanding our theological imaginations inside the academy, but hopefully outside the academy as well.
Amen. Ashe. I just want to.
Ashe.
Right. I just want to. Just all of that.
Xavier Margaret Miles asks, what wisdoms, pleasures, ways of being does womanist theopoetics make available for resistance and reimagination? That's so beautiful. Beautiful question.
Right?
Beautiful question. I know.
I had to read it like 3 times. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot in the question. It's not a bad question, Xavier, Margaret. We're just processing. I would, and just to tackle, because I don't know if I can even tackle all the parts, because wisdoms is a thing, pleasures is a thing, ways of being is a thing, resistance is a thing. So there's so many huge components of this question. In terms of resistance and reimagination, I think, again, Womanist Theopoetics, as we're kind of fleshing it out here together, can be a way of telling theological strongholds that they're not as powerful as they think. They're not as permanent as they think. That Womanist Theopoetics, to use your word, Dr. Quarles, is dynamic and is in many ways a reflection of a dynamic creator. So it can begin to start loosening the chains, the bonds that we have on the creator and how the creator talks and moves in the world. And it's, I mean, to think that the embodied resource of Black women can be that means through which liberation can be instituted, I think is a deeply important form of resistance, but also just kind of reimagining how the divine can be known.
That's good. I think I'm probably going to hit the end of that too. Sorry, I'm hitting the middle parts. But maybe there's some wisdom and pleasure in there, right? First, I just want to note, like, what I like what Dante put in the chat. The epistemological resistance to Western hegemony. So I want to name that. I like that phrasing that you offered. But I also just want to say, in terms of thinking about womanist theopoetics and resistance and imagination, I think it gives us. I mean, we know Trisha Hersey's book, like, Rest as Resistance, and I think part of what Womanist Theopoetics does is it calls us back to remembering to care for ourselves. And to not let what is happening, put plainly, I feel like we are overproducing. I feel like the academy, and I think the world often doesn't just ask of everyone, but specifically people of color and specifically women of color, often asks us to save everything, often asks us to create the things. Oh, you're so creative. You bring this, you bring that. So let me just use it and use it and use it until you are burnt out. Mm-hmm. And I feel like what Theopoetics can do is call us to another space of being, right? To say, there's another way that I can have this conversation with the divine that does not require me to run on empty. Yeah. There is another way that I can show up that doesn't require me giving you all of this with nothing left for myself. And I feel like part of that is the resistance. Part of that is how we reimagine what productivity means, what productivity looks like, and realizing that that nap is actually very productive, right? Or that play is actually very productive, that it's actually giving you more. And so how do we, I think, begin to redefine and reimagine what productivity can look like for us? And it might be that poem. It might be making that art. It might be making space for that. And it might be saying, hey, what might this look like if this is an assignment? What might this look, again, I'm an educator, so that's always where I'm going to go. What might this look like if we do this differently? And saying that it can be done differently if we actually take the time to say it can be done, right? So I feel like it opens up a lot of space if we're ready to do that and realize that the world might not be ready to meet us in that space. I'm gonna be honest about that. But also, how much more will we receive when we do it? And what will they get from us realizing that we're entering this new reimagined space of resistance through womanist theopoetics? I think could be very healing and whole, as well as disruptive. And I really like disruption. So I'm okay with that.
And I'm gonna jump back to the first part. And it's a big question. I don't know. And this is a quick answer. The wisdoms, pleasures, ways of being, I think can be attended to in something as simple as, what do Black women want? If that's a core means of doing theopoetic exploration, the resistance through imagination, that's gonna come automatically. But what do Black women want? What makes us content? What makes us happy? What makes us whole? What helps us feel loved? What helps us feel seen? what helps us feel cared for. What do Black women want? I think Womanist Theopoetics, in some ways, again, we're defining it as we go, has that question at the core. Because let's be real, I don't know if a lot of Black women can answer that right now, outside of an answer in terms of pushing back against the things that are being forced upon them, pushing back against solving problems that we didn't create. Yeah, what do Black women want? That would be that might be for me, that's coming to mind as an answer to this still really beautiful and brilliant question.
I think that's so rich. I mean, not only what do we want, but also not being ashamed or apologetic about our desires, our pleasures, fully accepting them, leaning into them, exploring them, right? It's so rich, right? Because so much of culture says you don't deserve, right? This Sabbath, this rest. You don't deserve these kinds of pleasurable experiences. You shouldn't consume. You shouldn't, right? To shave off all of the things that give us joy. Till you have, nothing left but this bland world. So I really love that. I really love that. I also like, Dr. Larkhart, what you spoke to in terms of, Lakeisha, this notion of pushing against the kind of ways. I think Katie Cannon said it like this: the dilemma of the Black woman ethicist as a non-canonical other is to work against the academic establishment while building upon it. And that part of our work is both within and without. But what are the possibilities when we're able to bring both of those energies or multiple energies into one space? I think that speaks to a much expansive, wider, and more bold future that I hope for. Any last thoughts? Folks should already be getting the book because I've already pre-ordered mine. But any thoughts about last thoughts you want to leave with our folks who have stayed on with us for an hour? Thank y'all so much for joining us. Any last thoughts?
All y'all in the comments, beyond our colleagues, whoever who's invested in liberation, let's keep building out theopoetics together in whatever ways and forms. I mean, Lakeisha's thinking about womanist play. I'm thinking about Black theopoetics. Let's put these things that we want and live into practice, so that other people can find that there's more in this theological world than just the small things we've been given or the things that we know we want to expand and move beyond. Like, let's build this out. Let's build this whole thing out together. And again, God is so much bigger than our discourses and our theologies, and we're only going to get a fraction of it. So let's keep building out. Let's remember we are a part of the theological tradition too. We are part of the God talk that's existing in history. So let's go all in and let's just do it. So that's my charge, and that's my push and encouragement.
And I will just say, as we're doing the pushing, I want to remind us to remember that we can do it whole. Remember that we are deserving of love, of care, of rest, of the unit that you want to put in. We are loving and deserving of however you want to show up and express who you are, the way that you are, and that you can do it unapologetically and beautiful, and that is okay. And I hope that as we do that, we're doing that boldly, that we're carving out spaces where they're not letting us be ourselves, but saying, I'm going to show up in my fullness, and know that we don't have to be fragments. We don't have to show up in pieces and tatters, and any system that tells us that we do is not a system that we need to be complicit in. That means it needs a system that needs to be decolonized, it needs to be decentered, and it needs to be torn down. And although we cannot do it alone, we can all do some of this together. And hopefully we can, as Tommy said, define this and do this work together, because it is hard work. The work of liberation is difficult and hard and arduous and exhausting and worth it. And so are each of you. So I just, my biggest prayer as we're doing this work, just remember that you matter, your body matters, care for yourself, play, do all the things along the way. We have one body, we have one time to enjoy this. So just make sure you're enjoying it along the way, and you deserve to be whole in anything you do. You deserve to be whole. Your body matters, and it deserves to be whole too. So, and thank y'all for tuning in. Thank you for your great questions, and for all the contributors of the book. Y'all are amazing. Thank you.
Sheila Spencer says, my spirit, soul, and body needed all of this. Thank you so much. I just want to tell Dr. Larkhart, Dr. Ordain, thank y'all for coming on the platform, for sharing the brilliance that is you, but also giving us a gift to take home through your work with Theopoetics in Color. It sounds like already it's a love letter to your people. So thank you so much for your work, your witness, and your wonder. For all of you who joined us tonight, thank y'all for coming and supporting Just Talk, and most importantly, the Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation, and also the Katie Geneva Cannon Center for Womanist Leadership. We have so many more events coming up. Next week, we'll be in conversation with Dr. Anne Marie Mingo on her fabulous book, Have You Got Good Religion? So you can check us out next week. But keep in touch with us at Union Presbyterian Seminary for more fantastic conversations. Thank y'all, and have a wonderful evening. Take care.
Thank you for joining us tonight. The next Just Talk Just discussion will be on Tuesday, April 16th at 7 p.m. We hope to see you there as we discuss clean water and Indigenous justice movements. Thank you, and have a good night.